So, these notes, as you've noticed, are your notes to fill out as we go. And in a sense, this class is really, the energy and effort you put into it, and the approach that you take to the things we're going to talk about is a lot like this empty book that you have in front of you at the moment. And you'll hear more about this later, but I'm hoping it starts empty and that you're ready to fill it. And we'll talk about how that interacts with some of our stories that we'll be talking about as we get to those. So meanwhile, I've already lost my clicker. So, all right. In business, these three circles are really important. Folks in business usually understand the what they do. In fact, they're not in business if they don't get that part, right? So they know what it is they do. And very often, they know the how to do it. In fact, you would hope so. If you are a factory that produces pencils, the what is the pencils, and the how is how you produce the pencils. But most companies can't answer the why. What drives them? Why do they produce pencils? What's the point? And if the point is only profit, then they're probably not producing very good pencils. And this is the same type of thing in our own lives. We've got these three things that we have to answer. The what is really important, and we normally often deal with only the what of something. And at some point, we often get into the how of a thing, but very seldom do we actually get all the way into the center of the circle and answer the why. And I want you to think about these three questions as we go through for the next 3 classes, talking in an introductory way about how we're going to approach material, about these 3 things, the what, the how, and the why. I also have a what and a how and a why for this class. I have to answer these 3 questions. The what, by the way, this class, I have wanted to teach for a long time. The how has been a struggle for me to do it and to approach it. And the why, I'm going to answer later tonight on why I want to teach this class. And I'm hoping that you'll play this game with me for a while, asking these 3 questions. But the why drives everything. The what's are what we see. All right, this is a T-bone image for sure here. So let's say you're the neighbor. You're kind of a snoopy neighbor. Maybe you live 50 yards away from, this side of the house. All right, so your home's over there. And you peek through the window quite often into this house. What do you see? Clean. Okay, well, maybe. At least some parts of it you can tell are pretty clean, right? You can see through the windows. Yeah, okay. There you go. All right. Clean. All right, yeah, there you go. What else might you see?
Furniture and people.
Okay, what furniture can you see?
Living room. TV.
You can see what?
TV.
You can see the TV. What else could you see?
Maybe a plant. Shelves.
Maybe you might be able to see the plant, and you probably can see the shelves. Can you see the couch? No, you can't see the couch, right? As far as you know, there might be armchairs in there. You have no idea what people are sitting on. You kind of, every once in a while, maybe notice somebody walk in, and then their head bobs down. But you're not really sure, why are they shorter? This view of the house, we can observe certain things, but there's a lot we don't know, right? Now, let's say we took a stroll one day and we walked around, and that end window we look through. You're that house down at that other end, right? You're visiting them, and you can see through. Now, it's the same house, but what do you see now? You might be able to see the couch, or at least probably an edge of it, right? Yeah. Coffee table. Yeah, you can see a coffee table. Yeah, not really sure what's down here at the end because of our view of this picture, but there's some other things at the end that you're going to be able to see. But you don't fully get to see the couch, and you don't really know maybe some other items until you get around to the other window. And we know this with a house. If we just stare inside of the same window all the time, if we just stay from the same view and look only in the same view, we have a very limited idea of what's inside. But as we go around and we look through other windows of the same exact house, it gives us a more full view of what's already there. It's not that the house has changed. It's the same house. It's the same furniture. It's just that we've now moved and we're looking through with a different view into the same thing.
Couldn't we get arrested for looking at somebody else?
This is why we're doing it cautiously from a distance so that we don't get arrested. But yes, exactly. That's like Bob's always watching out for us. This is good.
I can't see it anyway. So.
All right, yeah. Bob's, you're not going to get arrested. Don't worry. Right? Okay, so there are varying things, and even if we were at the far end, that tree might be in the way from us being able to see the coffee table, right? We might actually have to kind of move around a little bit from the same view that we were in and see something a little bit from a slightly different viewpoint, just a different angle than we were looking before. And this is an image that we're going to hold on to throughout this class. Because to some degree, we have a window that we understand and the one that we use as we look. And over time, as we grow and we learn new techniques and we learn new ways to read, we learn more about maybe the civilization that they live in. We might learn different cultures and what they do. That puts in perspective new windows that we're looking in and through. It's not that the furniture has changed on the inside, but now we understand it maybe in a different way, or we can see something that's in the house that we couldn't see before. Why can we see it now? Well, I have a new viewpoint, a different way of seeing. Had you never read the Old Testament, and as you read through the New Testament, and Christ yells, my God, why have you forsaken me?" What is your takeaway from that? God's forsaking him. But maybe is there something else that he's saying in that? And then later you go and you read the Old Testament and you're like, this is him quoting something that already exists. And our ability to increase our view comes from a lot of different tools, a lot of different ways of seeing things. And so a fair amount of what this class is about is as we've grown over time, right? We've matured. We're not using flannel graphs as kids looking at those anymore. We have actually gained some tools, but we probably haven't gone back to look at the stories again. So some of it is tools you already have, and some of it will be tools that you don't have yet, and that I'm going to share tools that have been given to me, right? I suspect T-Bone will kick in every once in a while and help us out with tools that I don't know about that T-Bone has, that he's going to help us with. And in all of this, it's not that we're looking at something different. We're just finding different views and different windows as we look through. And that's going to increase our ability to understand what's there. So tonight, I want to talk about facts and truth. All right. What is a narcissist?
Self-absorbed individual.
Okay, a self-absorbed individual. Needy. Need other people's energy. Okay, all right. Any other definitions? Or any other? All right, we're going to cut you off. All right, so we've got a dictionary definition. Narcissist is a person who has an excessive interest in or admiration of themselves. That's a narcissist. And that is, that's basically a fact, right? Like that is the definition. You pull out Webster, you open it up, you read entry number 1, you get something that looks like this. But as Michelle mentioned, narcissist is somebody who is, he is a Greek man, or let me start all over again. Narcissus is the son of the river god and a nymph. And he's incredibly handsome. He is the most handsome individual who has ever lived. And whether it is a human or a fairy or some other folk, they swoon after him. Everyone who sees him is so attracted to him. They can't help themselves. They're drawn towards him. Yet, Narcissus spurns everyone. He doesn't need anybody. And he doesn't ever show the love that's being shown to him or the affection that's being shown to him. He never shows it to anyone else. So one day, a nymph, Echo, comes by. And unfortunately, Echo's curse is that she can only echo the sentiment or the statement of something she hears. And so Narcissus, of course, doesn't ever respond to her in any way. And she can never respond back to him. And eventually she dies. She withers away to nothing. She doesn't really die. She withers away to nothing. And she lives in the caves to today, which is why you hear echoes. Narcissus goes hunting one day. And as he's hunting, he walks by a stream and he sees in the stream the most beautiful thing he has ever seen in his entire life. And he sits and he gets down into the stream and he stares and he tries to interact, yet it won't interact back. And he tries to somehow gain the appreciation of the thing that's there, but it won't respond. And he's so infatuated with this thing that's inside that he doesn't know what to do. And yet, at one point, he realizes it's him. And as he sits there and he's outpoured all of his heart, he sits and he starves himself, and eventually he withers away and dies. And the nymphs come, and part of almost like a burial thing is they take their hair and they cover him up with their hair. And as they mourn and then they move away, there is a white and yellow flower. The narcissus. Now, let me ask you, which of these are true about what a narcissist is? The definition, is this true of what a narcissist is? Webster? How about the story? Is there really someone named Narcissus who is the descendant of a river god and a nymph who lived and hunted and interacted with a nymph named Echo? Well, of course, those are not facts, right? But does it portray a truth? In fact, we know it portrays a truth because narcissist comes from this Greek story of Narcissus. By definition, narcissism is narcissism. Truth and fact aren't the same. Facts are truthful, but there is another form of truth that has nothing to do with fact. So here is a map of an area that Michelle and I are very fond of. It's up in the Trinity Alps. This is Emerald Lake. And this is just a Google map. I just kind of grabbed it. You can't really see because it's that one right there. Okay? That right there is Emerald Lake. It's located in the Trinity Alps. Northern California. The lake is in a granite bowl. It's about 5,500 feet above sea level. It's dammed with a rock wall that was constructed many, many, many years ago. There's all kinds of debris from strip mining that's left up there that people had used during that process. Okay. Now we can dive in and change our view a little bit and look at it as a topological map. And just above this, so here, this one was emerald. This is sapphire. And Sapphire Lake is just a little bit above, right? So it's also in the Trinity Alps. It's also in a granite bowl. It's surrounded by rainwater. The Sapphire Lake feeds into Emerald Lake. And it sits about 300 feet above Emerald Lake. What else do we want to say about it? That's enough for now. That's good. Now we take another view of this, right? Some more fact. Another fact would be, here's the satellite view of the same area. Now, do you feel like you understand this area? Probably not. Now, how about if I did this instead? How about if I gave you some pictures of a trip from a couple weeks ago when we hiked up into here? Yeah. Right? Now, does this help you see it? Now, I'm going to say it helps you see it, but again, these pictures are just facts, right? These are the things that you've taken in with your eyes and you've perceived. But is it the feeling that you would have felt if you were here?
That's what you would show somebody to try to explain what you went through. It's not what you went through. It's how you try to tell somebody what you did.
Yeah, very good. So this is a representation of some images that I took. But I can't tell you how majestic or beautiful this was. There are parts of it, the Alps pictures. So this is in the Trinity Alps. I don't know, we took 20 pictures each of the Trinity Alps. They were so majestic. Michelle, I don't know, every time we passed it, Michelle would say, it looks like we're in Switzerland. It is so amazing. And when I look at the picture, I'm like, why would I hike 13 miles to see that? That doesn't make any sense at all. I'm not going to hike 13 miles to see that. This is not the experience of the mountain. Experiencing the mountain and understanding a truth about the mountain is different than the facts of the mountain. I can list its height and all kind of the rainfall in the year, all these different things that are factual about the mountain. But the mountain and the lake have to be experienced to actually understand the truth of the mountain and the lake. It happens to be September 11th. I bet everybody here knows where you were on September 11th some years ago, right? You know exactly where you were. You know when you found out about the news. You know who you called or who you talked to. You know the emotion. You know what you experienced at that moment, as well as what you experienced over like the next week, month. There was a unity over the next year. Now, I can tell you, if I pulled out the newspaper ad from September 12th and read off about the experience, I would read the flight numbers, what times they took off, what times they crashed into their destinations, the numbers of people that died in each of those, the casualties that had occurred that fell out from that. Those are facts. But the feelings that we have, are those any different than truth? There's a truth to what we felt and a truth to what we experienced that can't actually be described in fact. Right? We can't iterate those things, enumerate those things. David, Bathsheba, Uriah, provide to me now some more fact about this story. Okay, all right. Anything else? Pardon me? David's a king. Okay, David's a king. What else?
And despite all of that, he's known as the man who's after God's heart. You know, the man after God's own heart.
Okay.
Even after that.
Even after that, yes. Yeah, an affair is not the right term when you're the king and you grab somebody and you take them for yourself.
Yeah, David could have had whoever he wanted, and he chose to take Uriah's one wife. He could have had personally him.
Yeah. And in all of this, right, Uriah is murdered. First, there's a framing that tries to get it set up. There's a child that's born. What happens to the child?
Dies.
Dies.
Uriah is very loyal.
Uriah is very loyal.
There's Uriah is an amazing man, amazing warrior. You know, there not much talk about Uriah.
Yeah.
You know, but such an amazing. I wish that we can take some of his character ways, is how he, in his heart, how he is true loyal.
Yeah.
You know, if we can be true loyal to Christ, that's something that we can, you know, emulate. That his character is true. You know, nothing can change who he is as a great warrior, and he cares for those that are out there on the field.
Yeah. So in the facts of the story, Uriah is almost like an opposite character of David's character. Right? Let me read something. Psalm 51. The fool has said in his heart, "There is no God." They are corrupt and have committed abominable injustice. There is no one who does good. God has looked down from upon heaven, upon the sons of mankind, to see if there is anyone who understands, who seeks God. Every one of them has turned aside. Together they have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. Have the workers of injustice no knowledge, who eat up my people like they eat bread? Have they not called upon God? They were in great fear there, where their fear had been. For God scattered the bones of him who encamped against you, and put them to shame, because God had rejected them. Oh, the salvation of Israel would come from Zion. When God restores the fortunes of his people, and Jacob shall rejoice, Israel shall be glad. That's Isaiah 53, not 51, or Psalm 53, not 51. But what is the feeling of that psalm? God will bring justice where it needs to be. Now let's see how that compares maybe to this and the story that I meant to read to start off with. Somehow I managed to get this on the wrong page. That was bad. Okay. All right. So we got the facts. And now let's hear the outcrying of David's heart. Be gracious to me, God, according to your faithfulness, according to the greatness of your compassion. Wipe out my wrongdoings. Wash me thoroughly from my guilt. Cleanse me from my sin. For I know my wrongdoings, and my sin is constantly before me. Against you only I have sinned, and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified when you speak, and blameless when you judge. Behold, I was brought forth in guilt, and in sin my mother conceived me. Behold, you desire truth in the innermost being, and in secret you make wisdom known to me. Purify me with hyssop, and I will be clean. Cleanse me, and I will be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and wipe out all my guilty deeds. Create in me a clean heart, God, and renew my steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence. Do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and sustain me with a willing spirit. Then I will teach wrongdoers your ways, and sinners will be converted to you. Save me from the guilt of bloodshed, God, and God, the God of my salvation. Then my tongue will joyfully sing of your righteousness. Lord, open my lips so that my mouth may declare your praise, for you do not delight in sacrifice. Otherwise I would give it. You do not take pleasure in burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. God, you will not despise. But by your favor, do good to Zion. Build the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight in your righteous sacrifices, in burnt offering and whole burnt offering. Then bulls will be offered on your altar. So which one contains the facts? Do they both contain facts? Do they also maybe both? Well, one of the things is very factual. We just sat there and listed out facts. And the other is David outpouring his heart to God. Does God not desire sacrifice? I mean, is that not what God asks? There's a certain amount of his outpouring that is not factual, yet it is true. We are very tied up into facts. And that happened at the Age of Enlightenment. And from that point on, Christians in general have been all about the facts of things. But in doing that, we lose truth. We overshadow it with a lot of things that we just miss. So, a man asks some questions and he gets some answers. And Jesus is very specific with his answers. But then he follows up with another question because he wants to justify himself. Well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus responds and says, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and he encountered robbers. And they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by coincidence, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, also a Levite, when he came to the place, he saw him and passed on the other side. But a Samaritan who was on a journey came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion and came to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn, took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii, gave it to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you. Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? Was there a Samaritan? Was there a man who got beaten up? Is that factual? Does it really exist?
Probably not.
Probably not. But is the story true? The depth, in fact, of the story, more truth is learned from the story than had Jesus simply said, everybody's your neighbor. In fact, from the story we learned even the people you hate can act neighborly to you, or maybe the other way to say it, those who hate you, you must continue to act neighborly to. The story, as we know, because we've studied it, is incredibly deep and has truth that has nothing to do with fact. In fact, if we think about it, Jesus' teaching is always in story. In fact, the Old Testament is constantly in story. We learn about God and we learn about Jesus. We learn about kingdom not based upon facts. There's no spreadsheet or tick mark box of things. Instead, It's story after story that portrays a truth that we're supposed to understand. I know how I ended up. I clicked on the wrong thing. All right. So we know this. Where does this come from? Where's this quote? Not Peter. Thomas. Thomas isn't there when Jesus arrives and shows himself and everyone else gets to see Jesus resurrected. Thomas isn't around. And Jesus comes back later, right? And Thomas is there. Now, does Thomas know anything about Jesus? What does he know? What kinds of things might Thomas know about Jesus? I mean, I suspect he knows his hair color. He knows the color of his skin, right? The tone of his skin. He probably knows his height, probably guesses about what his weight is. He knows how he laughs, what might make him laugh. He probably knows the buttons to push in order to get Jesus riled up about things. Like, there are things that he knows about Jesus. He has a series of facts that he knows about Jesus. But he doesn't actually understand the truth of Jesus until this point. And I think that's what we see in these words. My Lord and my God. Like, how long have you been living with him? But he didn't understand the truth of Jesus. He understood the facts about Jesus. There is a difference between fact and truth. And I want us to start thinking about this as we think about the Bible. We know how to do this in our daily lives. If you watch The Lord of the Rings, let's say you did, you might see a battle or two, right? Folks out there fighting weird creatures, swords, catapults, things. And if you were to watch a documentary about World War I, you might also see swords, people riding around on horses, probably no orcs. We know how to distinguish between the two different things. Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit. Is there a truth, by the way, in those books? Does anybody know what the truth is? Did you study this at all? Like, this is an entire book about World War II. And about what's going on in World War II. And it has very deep truths. But it also, when we read it, we know it's fiction and there's not a bunch of orcs going to be running around, rescue tomorrow. We're able to understand and to approach literature because we understand the differences between literature. Just like when we got done reading the psalm that David wrote, we naturally know that as David's writing the psalm, or at least when we engage our brains completely, we know that that psalm is an outpouring of his spirit, and the things that he says in it may not be factual, but they are definitely true. We understand that in poetry. There's a truth in it. And I want us to start thinking about the Bible as not a book, because it's not a book. It is a library of books. It is a whole bunch of books. It is literature all over the place, right? What is Job? What kind of literature is Job?
Sad.
It's poetic, right? It's poetry. There are forms of literature that we have experienced in some of our other classes that we've had recently, right? Where we've looked at different poetic forms and different Hebrew forms of writing. And those different forms of writing, there are expectations of those forms when we come to them, and how we think about them, and how we digest them, and what the purpose is, and what they're trying to say. In the Bible, we want to do the same thing. We want to approach it understanding that this is like a library that you go to, and different sections are telling different truths, but they're telling you truth in different ways. All facts are truth, but not all truth is fact. And this, it sounds like we've been spending a lot of time, and we have. Because this is our common age problem. We want everything to be factual. But not everything is factual. We need to actually separate those. And we can kind of do it when we listen to Jesus talk about a parable. We know that there are great truths in that parable, and he's not necessarily talking about somebody who found a pearl in the field. We put that together, right? And so as we're listening and looking at these stories, the first thing that we want to do is not worry about the fact. In fact, I gotta find a new phrase. I'm going to say the flannel graph is the fact. What is the fact of the flannel graph image that we saw earlier? We got a flannel graph of life, we got Adam, and we got Eve, and eventually it looks like they got some clothes on, and there was a tree, and it looked like it had some fruit. These are the facts of it.
Sure.
But is there a truth to that story that isn't related to the fact that we can look past and start understanding the truth of what's being told? And that's what we're going to be more interested in. All right, I got one more thing to read here. Who falls in love with a book? So most of you have heard me quote Rabbi David Foreman. And the reason is, he is a person who is able to take and provide tools on how to read and how to observe and how to look at things fresh. We're going to take some of his tools that I've learned from reading his works. We're going to put some of those in practice, as well as some other tools. But the tools are really practical tools. And you'll see as we start going through them, there's nothing special about them. In fact, people have told you before, read this story like you've never heard it before. The question is, how do you do that? But
the name of the guy again?
David Foreman, Fohrman. All right. There's a reason I want to read this. So bear with me. It's a strange sensation to fall in love with a book, but that's what was happening. There was something special about this text. Of course, on some level it sounds silly to say that. As an observant Jew, I always held the Torah to be sacred, to be a divine work. But it's one thing to believe that a sacred text is unique and special, and another to see that it is with your own eyes. I found that I didn't need to be preached at to believe that there was something deeply sacred in this work. If I just sat down and read it, the text would invariably leave me with something unexpectedly profound. And along the way, with a wink and a nod, I would find a way to remind me that it was no ordinary book. Its layers of meaning would dazzle me. I had an interesting experience along these lines a number of years ago, back when I was teaching a non-credit class on the book of Genesis at Johns Hopkins University. I had been modeling the basic techniques I described above. Clear your mind, start fresh, ask basic questions, sift the text for clues, observe the language carefully, and let the larger picture of the text is painting slowly reveal itself. As I was about to begin the 16th and last class, someone in the back of the room, Jerry, a professor at the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, raised his hand and asked, "Could you say a few words about the authorship of the Bible?" Truth be told, the question of authorship was something I had been assiduously avoiding in that class. It just didn't seem appropriate to bring it up. Here I was, an observant Jew, teaching under the aegis of Johns Hopkins, a secular university. Well, I had my own religious convictions about the Bible being a divine work. This wasn't something I was keen to share with the students there. They weren't coming to be preached to, they were coming to learn. So my approach was to take the question of the authorship pretty much off the table. one way or the other, I had told them, the Bible is the greatest bestseller in the history of the world. There's got to be a reason for that. Let's study the text and see what we make of it. But now Jerry was threatening to blow my cover. I hesitated a bit in answering him. To buy a little time, I asked him to clarify. He responded, well, I had always learned that the Bible was put together by a scattershot collection of authors. There was an E author and a J author. Isaiah found Deuteronomy, and there maybe is a priestly author too. And this was kind of pieced together by some redactors, he said. But I'm having a hard time seeing how that could possibly be so. I mean, it's all so interconnected. The word patterns, the structural features of Genesis are woven into those of the book of Numbers, which are woven into those of Exodus. It all seemingly is so amazing. It's unified. I don't see how more than one author could have possibly written this. This, for me, answers the why. Why do I want to teach this class?
Is that a true story, or is that...
That is a true story.
That is a true story.
From Rabbi Foreman, yeah. And this is why I want to teach the class. So for me, over the years, a variety of people have introduced me to different techniques, different things that I didn't know before, so that I could see through windows that I didn't even know existed into the same room that I had always looked through and looked into. But now, I could suddenly see that the stories in Exodus were again repeated in Leviticus. The stories in Genesis, you keep seeing them over and over again. We saw this when we were doing the prophets. How often did the garden as an image show up? There's a rhyme and a rhythm about the Bible. And it changed for me at some point where it was no longer just facts, but there was suddenly like truth that I had never noticed before, but had always been in front of me. And part of the reason was I didn't care about the facts anymore. They were uninteresting. The truth, on the other hand, was incredibly interesting and exciting. And it allowed me to actually see something that God was trying to teach his people early on who didn't care about facts either. Fact understanding and concerns about facts are something that Greek Westerners care about, not something that existed before that. And for us to understand the Bible and the words in the Bible, we have to change the lenses and look through a little different way. Get a couple different tools. And once we have those tools, we'll start, I think, seeing the truth. And we're going to do this together. So the next two classes, we're going to talk about two more things that we have to kind of get out of the way before we start digging into the first chapter of Genesis. We're going to talk about what does it mean, I'm going to throw this one out there because you're going to have 2 weeks to think about it. What does it mean for the Word of God to be inspired?
That God had something to do with its writing.
Yeah, this is your...
He inspired writers to write different things.
So for the next 2 weeks, I want you to think about, and this might help you. It says all Scripture is inspired and profitable. All right. The Scripture is the Tanakh. We have Torah, Nehavim, and the Ketuvim. Torah is the first 5 books. We have the writings, and we have the prophets. All right? And that word, prophets and the writings. All of that is inspired. And I want you to ask yourself this question. For each of the books, as you think about them as individual works of books, how is that inspired? What does it mean for that thing to be inspired? What does it mean for this next thing to be inspired? And my suspicion is as you move along through the books of the Old Testament, some of them might be a little more challenging to answer that question than others. what does it mean for that thing to be inspired? This is your homework. Okay, so I'm not going to take questions on the homework, but I'll take questions, any other questions that we have at the moment. We've got just a couple of minutes and then we'll be done.
In my mind, I would suggest a little bit of work on wisdom and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes.
Okay,
The inspiration idea, I think, is in the wisdom idea.
okay, all right. Phil is giving you hints for your homework. Okay, and then the other one, and we're gonna, it's one of the things we'll be talking about. The other thing we're gonna be talking about is starting to introduce tools for us so that when we read Genesis chapter 1 again, we've got a couple tools in our pocket that we can pull out and look at and try to read it fresh and new. All right? Sound good? You've got empty books. You can write on them, do whatever you want. Maybe put your homework in there. That'd be awesome.